The real threat to our global safety is a dirty bomb, and not the Kremlin's massive nuclear arsenal. Washington's massive nuclear arsenal isn't really part of the problem either. Recently, the mainstream media has been telling the world that Putin has been threatening to nuke the West if this, that, and the other doesn't happen. There's this thing called mutually assured destruction. That policy of having a balance between the great nuclear powers is what kept us alive through the Cold War. And if we remember history, when the Soviet Union fought Finland, the Soviet Union actually looked very weak and inefficient, and it sort of gave a PR signal to Berlin. Why don't you just invade the Soviet Union and take the living space that you need? Putin knows in his mind that he needs to remind the West that just because the special military operation was, especially in the first half a year, fought specifically with the objective to only destroy military targets, keep the civilian population safe, not really touch their infrastructure. He wanted to remind them that it would be very easy to destroy if he wanted to. Now, one thing that could potentially be a real threat to starting a nuclear war would be if Ukraine were to join NATO. That would basically put NATO de facto into a war against Russia that's already started. That war would become quickly a total war. Nuclear war. That's not going to happen because NATO told Zelensky no. Now, if you're sitting in Washington, you know that Ukraine can't join NATO or it's a nuclear war and you can't launch nukes against Russia or the world ends. But what if a third party uses a dirty bomb? That just means that all that Russia could do, in a legalistic sort of sense, remember, Putin's background has a lot of law in it. he likes his rules. That would essentially mean that Russia would only really be authorized to retaliate against Kiev. The real people who know in Washington, the Kissinger-type people, they know that Ukrainians are just sort of like Russians from the South. And if they use a dirty bomb to destroy people in the Donbass and Russia were to massively retaliate, it may not give them the dream of the regime change in Moscow that they were looking for, but it certainly kills a lot of Russians. That's the real goal, to drain Russia and hopefully drain Russia of man and resource to create some sort of regime change. This dirty bomb strategy would allow there to be this sort of kind of preemptive nuclear strike that would be very safe for the West and accomplish a lot of their goals. If I were sitting in the Kremlin, would be to make sure that there is no means or no dirty bomb being produced by Kiev, because that would be the ideal situation. They could use 1 or 2 or 3. Russia retaliates. Everyone in that giant region of the world becomes a nuclear hellhole that's unpopulated by anyone. A win for the Brzezinski, Kissinger, Rand project for a new American century type of people.
I just can announce that I can translate from Russian into English. So
okay, please do it.
This the post contains photographs showing the evidence of the stuff that Ukrobs used against our guys. They threw it on positions, like not from the sky, but they shot from something. The containers with either chemicals or radiation. The direction of front line is Gorlovka direction, Dokuchevsk direction, Zaporozhye direction. On the 9th of October 2025, about 22, about 4 p.m. And from these containers, something was leaking, and there was a white smoke coming out of these containers. And our guys who were on positions got either chemical or radiation, like poisoning, and they had symptoms, throwing up, irritation of their eyes, like could not see anything because it was dark in their eyes. Their joints were very painful. Their gums were like bleeding. Bleed from ears and nose. So these are the symptoms of radiation sickness.
Here's whatever the heck this happens to be, and you can see the radiation symbol here, and I guess this is like a lot number. how much it weighs, so many kilograms.
I think this information should be sent to Minister of Defense of Russian Federation because I've never heard anything about that.
Well, I'm sure they know it if the whole unit
I don't know.
was in the hospital. But this was DPR soldiers,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I'll translate this to English so you guys can actually read it. Dropped several places on the front, about 16. Some liquid was oozing out of them and white smoke was coming out. Soldiers who received either chemical or radiation damage were taken to the hospital. Symptoms: nausea, vomiting, eye irritation, darkening in their eyes, joint aches, bleeding from the gums, ears, and nose. As if not the symptoms of acute radiation sickness. Clarification: containers with a length of about 40 centimeters. They were not dropped from the UAV, but fired from something. The affected fighters were evacuated to the relevant medical institutions. The diagnosis, unfortunately, was confirmed. Those who came close to it suffered. What was the name of the city?
It was near Gorlovka. Which is
Gorlovka.
north of
Goрловка,
Donetsk.
Zaporozhye, and Dokuchaevsk.
So let's pull this up on a map. How's that? Let's see, maps. So here's Donetsk here in the center, and just to the upper right, you see Gorlovka right here, and Luhansk. You can see on the map right here. So you literally drive through Gorlovka on your way to Luhansk.
You know, it must be said, and it must be always remembered that this war is not between Russians and Ukrainians. It's not a Ukrainian civil war. This is a war of genuine 21st century Nazis that have taken over the Ukrainian government, and they're fighting against the future of humanity. Well, I mean, you have to understand with politicians and media everywhere, but most especially in the West, you know, and I've said it for a long time, the number one rule of politics is that what they say means nothing, and what they do says everything. Remember that the same people that brought the Nazis in Ukraine to power through the Maidan in 2014, the same ones that helped build these Nazi battalions, Dnieper and Azov and these other ones, you know, they're the same people that created Al-Qaeda. They're the same people that created ISIS in Syria, you know, and it's, you know, and these are truly, you know, butchers. They're cannibals, you know, I mean, literally. And it's the people behind them that are our real enemies, you know. And I mean, the American government and also the governments of the EU now, as the Europeans are finally starting to understand, they don't care about their own citizens at all.
No, they don't.
They obey what their owners tell them, which is the oligarchs, the corporations. You know, Benito Mussolini, the founder of the fascist party in Italy, the founder of the ideology of fascism, he said, fascism could better be called corporatism because it is the merger of state and corporate power. And if that's not a definition of the kind of government that the U.S. and the EU have today, corporate and state power, then there ain't one.